Antonio, you're live on the air. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you. And Shana Tova, Gamar Tatima Tova, Rabbi. My question is about the book of John, chapter 20. A very famous apologist, Dr. William Lane Craig, argues that in John 20:28, when the doubting Thomas, after seeing the risen Jesus, says, "My Lord and my God," he says that he's calling Jesus Lord and God properly in a way that is unique from the Hebraic tradition in the Hebrew Bible. But my question is, when you translate this phrase into the Hebrew, Adoni ve'elahai, how is it possible to know then that the doubting Thomas is actually referring to Jesus as the one God, the Father?
I want you to know that this is the best stuff they have. There's no doctrine of the Trinity in the New Testament. I mean, forget that. Doctrine of Trinity is a later development. I'm not just talking about the word Trinity. He's using this passage, which is unique to John. About 90% of the book of John appears nowhere in the other three Gospels, including the story of the doubting Thomas. And in the text, Thomas, who doubted, he was able to put his finger and see that Jesus physically rose. The story is really the end of the book of John. John 20 is really the last chapter. John 21 is almost certainly added on. So right, so he said, "My God, my Lord." And so that means nothing. And he's saying that's a proof. It's so crazy. You know, Craig, he's a very smart man. I've debated him. I've even debated him on Christian television. And this is the best stuff he can come up with. When I debated him, I said to him the doctrine of Trinity is nowhere found in the Hebrew Bible, and he was honest enough to admit that it isn't anywhere in the Hebrew Bible. So you're right. So this is the best they have. And as I say, when Thomas said, "My Lord, my God," doesn't mean he's saying you are God. And not only that, the book of John is very clear that Jesus is not God. He is not omnipotent, which means all-powerful. Openly in John chapter 5, we are told, I mean, this is the author of John. I'm telling you, 21 is written by somebody else, almost for sure. But in the same book, Jesus openly says that I can do nothing of my own, but only of the one who sent me. Do you know that the longest dialogue in all the Christian Bible, by far, is in the book of John? And who is the dialogue between? It's a big dialogue between Jesus talking to God and praying and asking for things. Goes on for chapters, 5 chapters. That's called the farewell discourse. Asking God that the disciples should be one as we are one. I mean, it goes on and on. It's so in context, the Jesus of the fourth gospel, and it's important to note that the fourth gospel contains the highest Christology found anywhere in the Christian Bible. If Jesus can't do anything of his own, that means the central feature, identifying feature of God is he is all-powerful. He's all-powerful. And Jesus admits that I can do nothing of my own, but only of the one who sent me. What do you need, really? Like what do you need? That means all this doctrine of the Trinity, the hypostatic union, is all a very late development. And in fact, the church fathers who invented the word Trinity, like Tertullian, they didn't believe in the doctrine of the Trinity as it was hammered out in Nicaea. It was a point in time where the Father existed and the Son did not. I mean, just look at John 5:30. So this is what's called an eisegesis, most dangerous approach to interpreting texts. Most dangerous thing you could do. An eisegesis means that you, as opposed to an exegesis, an eisegesis means that you take a passage or a part of a passage and you remove it, you extract it from its context, you're gone. You're gone. And that's what's happening here. And as I said, if Jesus is saying you are the only true God, this is eternal life, this is John 17 already. This is eternal life, they may know you, the only true God, only. The Greek word is monos, that's a Greek word, only means that no one else. And Jesus Christ whom thou hast sent. I can do nothing. If I bear testimony of myself, that testimony is nothing. What does that mean? I want to just do this with you because you kind of asked the question, but you know the answer. I want to explain how healthy hermeneutics works. I mean, you look at any ancient text, you want to know, what am I reading? Either a text you believe in or you don't believe in, whatever, but what's going on? What was the intent of the author? So in any kind of putative holy book, there are going to be texts that are very clear and other passages that are nebulous and not exactly clear, okay? Listen, if you just learn this, it's worth tuning in for the show. This is like the laws of thermodynamics. I mean, everything we know about relies on it's just immutable. What happens is you always have, in any book that's important, let's just say a supposed holy book, you have passages that are very clear of what is intended, and then you have other passages which are not completely clear. So what you always do, if you want to understand just somebody wrote the book of John. I'm not going into why, but whoever authored the book of John not only wasn't John, but actually says he's not John. I'm not going into, but it's actually in this region that we could see that at the end of John. But whoever wrote it, we want to know what was he thinking. So the fundamental rule of hermeneutics is we recognize there are passages that are very clear, and we have some passages that are a little ambiguous. This is not really ambiguous. This is just forced, but let's just call it ambiguous. You could say it's ambiguous. So you always use passages that are in the light to interpret passages in the dark. And if you ever encounter a cult, they're always reversing it. They're focused, they're zooming in on ambiguous verses and using that eisegesis, that their spin on a nebulous, a passage in the dark, to reinterpret explicit passages. They all do this. They do this with the Trinity, interpreting Tanakh. Of course, there are some verses in Tanakh that are a little hard to understand. There are plenty of verses that are. Most of it is very easy. But there are some verses that are not so simple. You really have to know the context. You really have to understand what's going on. But that's the game. Now, the reason why I should footnote this, is I think I'd be remiss, is the reason why the story of doubting Thomas is there is one for the obvious, because Jesus then goes on to say, you saw and believed, blessed are those who didn't see, who didn't, and they believe anyway. So you see the takeaway there. But also, the story of the doubting Thomas is there as a pushback against Paul's view. As you look at the Gospels in chronological order, there's a pushback against 1 Corinthians 15, which means that in Paul's view, the resurrected body was a spiritual body. It's not a mortal body. It's not it's not the body that died. It's something else. It's a body, but it's a spiritual thing. Paul wins in that he is the most influential author by far. He created Christianity. He is the author of Christianity. But Paul was using the Greek view that the physical body doesn't resurrect itself. That view falls out of favor really quickly. So the Gospels are already abandoning it. Now, Mark ends with 16 verse 8. So at least there's an empty tomb. Paul doesn't mention an empty tomb. But then you have, let's just say, go to Luke. So Jesus is already eating with the disciples in a room in Jerusalem. And is making the point, how is it that could a spirit eat burnt fish and drink? No. And this is saying, further, it's a real physical, full-blown resurrection. That's why the story is there. It's there for a number of reasons, but that's the big takeaway. Anyway, it's very, very, very good. But now you understand how to examine text. You look at clear text. So in the case of the book of John, I want to know somebody wrote this book at the very end of the first century, of a highly literate Christian. What was he thinking? Okay, thank you for your question.